Alright, hey folks, back again for, as promised, a day engagement to demonstrate another one of my methods in my comprehensive tutorial, that is overhauling the target and ascertaining a 0-degree angle on bow. And so also want to use this opportunity to also clear up a couple of misconceptions that people might have from my previous video. There was a few things in there that I sort of miscommunicated, I guess, and that is one of which is in my file here. The scope is not in degrees; it is in fact in centiradians. And so you may remember from my previous video, this scope range based on length here, this calculation was off. And so the reason for that is the formula was pulling from these marks here, assuming that these marks were in degrees, and they are not. And so I fixed this now so that the range is actually more in line with between these two methods here. It's more accurate. And so just figured I'd mention that just to avoid any real confusion there with regard to that. The other thing is that I mentioned the 10th decimal place. It's really the first decimal place, not the 10th. We're not going 10 places past the 0 here. We're just sticking with the 1 place after the 0. I kept referring to 10th. It should be the first decimal place. So just know that. You certainly don't need to go to a level of accuracy for 10. It's definitely not necessary. And so just a couple things I figured I'd mention here. So at this point, what we've got here is we've got a target. This is on easy mode again, just for instructional purposes. But I've set my speed to slow speed ahead here. This will give me about 10 knots. And you can see I've identified this ship as looks to be a heavy tanker, type 27. And so really the first thing I'll do here is, in this method, as I will do some plotting, and that's primarily because we can use ship length. Angle on bow is relatively easy to either measure by way of aspect ratio or eyeball in this game upon initial sighting, which I just sighted this target just a few minutes ago, and so this is what he looked like when I sighted him. It's relatively easy to gauge angle on bow, and so therefore, and since it's hard to see the mast height at this range, I can't even really see the mast hardly. But it is always, almost always anyway, much more often anyway, easier to read the length of the target in centiradians here. So looking at this guy, is about 7 centiradians long at this point here. So because it's relatively easy to gauge angle on bow, and because it's easier to read the length of the target off, I've been playing with the idea of just measuring range based on those parameters, and then doing plotting based on that. And so I've had some success with that, so we'll see how it goes here. But at any rate, I can't see the mast heights very well, and so what I'm going to do is just eyeball his angle on bow at this point, and I want to say it's probably left. He is facing away from us, and so his angle bow is greater than 90. So I think I will say his angle on bow at this juncture is probably right 110. So right 110. So what I'll do is I will just to start this off, I've got I'm plug a couple things in my file here. So the bearing is 70. Bearing is 70. Own course. I'll need to pull that real quick here. And I'll just use the nav map so I can read it off here. Own course is 100. What did I say? Left 110. So the course is about 100 at this point. And so what I'll do is I will go here and I'll match his course. Oh well, look at there. We already are on his course. Okay. And so I've roughly matched his course. Of course, I'm not going to go through the constant bearing method that I demonstrated in my previous video, but what I will do is I will match his course, and I will keep an eye on the speed differential there. So we are gaining on him a little bit, so I actually will drop down to dead slow. We'll just keep watching him. But at this point, we're going to start a plot. And we're going to start a plot. Let's see. I got to get that. I should get the angle on bow dialed in here. It was at 70. It was left. Just set this preliminarily here. A couple of settings here. Just I like to do from the outset. So left 110 is what I said. I think here. So 110. That's close enough. Just so we've got that in there. And I'm going to do the steering from the attack scope again. Again, it's, you know, with a full crew or with help anyway, you'd have, you know, you'd be running this from the UZO to utilize that additional zoom factor of 7 versus 6, and you'd have to, of course, have somebody posted up down here in the tower to read the bearings off as you do this plotting, and as your navigator does the plotting, etc. And so, ideally, you have the navigator either in the tower. Likely in the tower. So I've actually dropped speed down, and luckily enough, you know, that's pretty close to what his speed is here. Without going through the full constant bearing method, I can see that the bearing really isn't changing very much at this juncture. And so we are still going to plot just to demonstrate that method. At this point. I want to make sure I have the values, his length and height values in the file already ready to go. So 142 and 38. So we'll go. We'll use this tab here because it has the attack disc on it. So 142 mast height 38. Let's have it in that calc. We'll put the mast height in this. Oops, where all these things show up, you update it here. So I should probably just link all these. So 142 and 38 are in all these places here, so we're ready to go. So yeah, he is actually gaining on us a little bit, so it's probably about 7.5, 8 knots. But we'll so we will. I'm gonna go at slow speed and then go 10% slower off of that. That'll give us a little faster. We don't completely lose him here. So we've got the angle on bow dialed in. So we were always able to read that off. So as we do our plotting here, what we'll do is we'll zoom in a little bit to the point where we can have a little room to work with here. So he's off of our starboard beam. So we'll put our map like this. And what I like to do when I do plotting is I like to plot in 5-minute increments. Just it's enough time. You can do it any one you wish, obviously, but 5 minutes seems to be based on historical references what they used back then, and it just allows for more ample time between bearings to do all of your cleanup work, etc. And so, all right. So at this point, we're going to call his bearing 71. So that'll be his bearing that we read, and the first thing we need to do. We'll load 71, but then we'll also come over here and we'll measure his length, and that'll give us his angle on the bow. So the length is about 7 centiradians there. So remember 771. So at this point, whoops, we're going to put our course down here in this below piece here. We got his course at 100. Bearing is 71. Own course is 100, target course is 100. So his angle about this point is left 109, and we said we thought he had 7 marks. Left, and his angle on bow is 109. We're using 6 zoom, so his range is 7670. 7670 right there. So at that point, one thing I did forget to do here is I forgot to put a timestamp down. So we'll put a timestamp down there now. Wasn't quite right on, but whatever. So first thing you should do is put a timestamp down. That marks your time, starting your time. And then we'll read the true bearing off so we can plot it. So we'll plot 171 at 7670. 171 at 7670. All right. 7-1, and we'll do a little little over, a little less than 171, just because we were a little late on the draw, getting the timestamp point 7670. So we'll say right about there. That's close enough. All right, so that's our first plot point. So then from that, at 1948, we will do another do another reading here. All right, so that's the first point. So at this point, you know, we'll keep watching him, watch and see if his angle on bow changes. One thing that's also good to do when you do your subsequent plot points, so his angle on bow could be on either side of 90, right? I was fooled recently into doing this plotting, thinking he was facing away from us, so his angle on bow might have been 120, I said, and in reality it was 60, and so that obviously makes a big difference when you're measuring length for range purposes. So it might be also a good idea for subsequent plot points to sort of eyeball where that mast height would be and just get a rough estimate of his range just based on mast height as a sort of an auxiliary check, so that you know that you're correct in terms of his angle on bow. Because if obviously the mast height is growing, the range is getting less, you know he's certainly not at an angle on bow away from you, he's at an angle on bow toward you, and you might need to reassess your initial plot there, so, or your initial estimate anyway. So so once we get a few plot points down, we're not going to plot. Really, the object here is to get maybe three or four bearing lines here. So we'll do this evolution over the course of about 15 minutes, and then run around the target in order to ascertain the zero angle on bow. So now that we've got that first one plotted, what I will do is I will bid you all farewell for now until I have a couple more plot points plotted, and then we will we'll catch you a little later once we're doing our sort of end around here to get in front of them. So I'll talk to you guys soon here.